I don't have a lot of suggestions, but, you know, in doing a percentage, part of what strikes me is that, you know, it costs a certain amount to build a school. We can't build a half a school or a quarter of a school. So I don't know exactly how that would work. I'm still kind of mulling that over, a percentage of for new construction, because I'm not sure you could do a portion of a school.
Well, and that's an interesting point, because if you recall, and there's no reason you should, but the total amount for the new schools between now and the 2014 date, I think, was $487 million. So let's say we generate 500. That, you know, so then if you say, I mean, then that's an issue. Do we decide, what schools do we decide not to build? And that, in fact, will cause, obviously, repercussions with regards to housing of students that may result in double sessions or some other form of pain. But then you've got, on the other hand, all these schools that have gone on forever, and clearly the sense of some of the, in fact, I'd say of most of the committee members, is revitalization. I mean, if any one visit had an impact, it was Glenn Duncan. And so, yeah.
Sparks High?
Well, not as much as Glenn Duncan.
I do think, from having attended, I think, all but one of the meetings, Senator Townsend really is looking to this board for some thoughts. And one thing that we offered in that one public comment, too, was that the process for looking and prioritizing is something that we need to grapple with in this district, and whether we invite some, look at our existing, I hate to use the word, with committees that we have, but that feed in, or the public, I know. That the other thing the committee is looking at is not just the 7 trustees, we are the elected officials responsible, but what goes into that decision-making for this priorities. And you know, I think we've talked with Mark, and he's brought to the board before too, how do we grapple with that? We have our allocation program, but beyond that, how do we work with dealing with the optimization plan and how that plays out in that constant monitoring piece versus taking a look at a committee that, you know, needs to know now how we think we're going to spend it. We have to tell the public some specifics. So I'll stop there.
Barbara Clark?
You know, I would think that this is a huge issue to me, and would want something in front of me from staff indicating that on the revitalization list, here's number 1 priority, here's number 2 priority on the technology, on the schools. What would happen if we didn't do these schools? What's the impact? Can they be zoned elsewhere? Or this is such a huge issue to sit here without anything in front of us or a recommendation other than think about percentages, to me is a little disheartening. I don't understand, because I think the decision about whether or not what's going to be, what possibly could be funded in revitalization, when that's so important to those individual schools, and making the determination that some may get it and some won't, and new schools that maybe we can do without some new schools because we'll do another alternative method. I don't know how to come up with an answer sitting here today.
Well, you weren't supposed to.
No.
Or even talk about what the possibilities are without anything.
But what you've done is you've said for you to have those discussions, you need some additional pieces of information. Yeah. Go ahead, Jody.
Well, I agree that the public needs information, and that we need to be able to kind of extrapolate out different scenarios given different amounts of money. However, as we already know, this is a moving target. And I don't know if at any point I'm going to feel comfortable saying, okay, if we only get half of what we want, we'll do this. We've gotten in trouble before about that, about what we're going to do in 2 years or 5 years or 7 years. And so, yeah, incline's one. And so maybe it's a matter of thinking about a format for community participation to help us arrive at those decisions when it's time to make them. Maybe that's another discussion that we should have, because I don't have a crystal ball.
That's what
and
Barbara
none of us does.
suggested in her comments.
Yeah, we did suggest that basically in the public comment, and,
Barbara?
I'm sorry. Just lost my train of thought. Continue on, and I'll come back.
Paul, and then I get to talk.
I think one of my goals is, and I understand, that this whole process has been, demanding and maybe somewhat unrealistic of what the expectation has been. Bottom line is, I want to make sure that it's the board that has the decision on how the money is spent and not the committee. And so the timing does become an issue, and certainly I appreciate all that, and we will come back soon, as I'm thinking here with some scenarios of, okay, if we get 500, if we get 400, if we get 300. And you know what's kind of amazing about all of this? Do you know what we were originally hoping to get when we were at the legislature?
90.
Yeah.
They did us a favor. Every time we talk about capital investments to the public, at least in my opinion, we need to do one thing at the very beginning, and that is spend 5 minutes rehashing how we got here and not assume that everybody knows it. And within that area, I think we need to specifically list those things that we have done to save money by re-engineering and rezoning and, the other things that we have done, so that we remind people that, I'm sorry, this is not a blue sky, which is the best thing. We're not just taking, out there and spending money because this is what we think we need. We are constantly refining, and these are the adjustments. And as we do that, that enables us in a positive way to let folks know that things do change. We can't say now what we're going to need even in 5 years. What if there's an earthquake?
I think what we need is a policy.
I knew you were going to say that.
I mean, that's what it sounds like.
In a way, it is. In
Mark
some
has
ways.
brought that up before, too, and we've talked to just
Dan?
incidentally about that policy for this.
The issue, though, is if the committee says we want something, and we want it in a month, we haven't helped Paul at all.
Well,
We've got to, as part of what we're talking about today, make some decisions about something that's going to happen over the next month. If the committee says, the only way we're doing this is if,
Yeah, more
we
than
don't
a
want to find
month.
out a month from now, they say this, and we look at them and say, oh, we haven't thought about that yet. So there's a scenario on the table that says they're going to demand that, and are we going to be ready or not?
Identifying resources, my belief, in the March meeting. And at that time, I believe the topic will come up.
So we can tell them we're working on it.
Well, I'm going to tell them that in February, at
Yeah,
February
okay.
19th. But we need to, this is on every agenda item until May. And so we need to be ready to come back to you in 2 weeks with some more information, some scenarios, because you bring up good points. This whole thing has been difficult. I mean, when we haven't even begun the discussion of resources and we're already in February, timeline is pretty aggressive.